All right, guys, we are live. All right, so today we're going to take a look at a couple things. Um, as you can see, the title for today's show is Highest Paying Trade Jobs. So let's take a look. I've got this list pulled up, and this is from Mint Life, from Intuit. And I think that they kind of cover a bunch of different trades. Now, I tend to think that these numbers are a little skewed and they're a bit, how to say, specific to certain sectors of these trades. And with that in mind, you got to keep that kind of floating in your mind when you're trying to plan your next few steps or looking at what is a good spot to be in. Now, some of these show medical, and I don't really, I know nothing about medical, so I can't make any recommendations. But let's start from the top here of the list, and we'll work our way down. Now, what's cool about this list is that it shows us job growth rate too. Between 2020 and 2030, which is going to tell us, whether there is more demand or less demand for that trade in specific. So, starting off with a power plant operator, typically those would have been the highest. And I've met a lot of guys where their average annual salary is a lot higher than 103. But if you notice that they're projecting a 13.6% loss for the growth of that position, and that's just because of the way America is looking at nuclear energy and how they are looking to kind of posture themselves in the future. So that actually makes sense. Elevator mechanic. Yeah. All right. Now those guys make a poop load of money. I've always known them to. And it looks like that they're projected to grow about 6.1% over the next decade, which, that's pretty impressive in itself. You have like Otis, and who else? Is there Krupp? ThyssenKrupp, I believe, is another elevator company. I know that Otis and ThyssenKrupp are two of the largest in the country. And those guys typically make right between 75 and 125,000 a year, from what I've seen, depending on the region. Lineman, there is a guy. I haven't really talked to him, but I watched a bunch of his content, and he's not really in the trade space, but I know he was a lineman. So I might see if I can get him on the cast here and talk to us and kind of see what advantages there are to being a lineman, what kind of projections they see, and, where he may see kind of the industry going. So the guy's name is RP Thor on YouTube, and he's a pretty cool guy, older, so he's been around a while. I think he's in the more retired space now, but I think he would be a good insight for this. Working down, construction manager. Now, for a construction manager, $73,000 a year. I guess it doesn't seem like that's the right number, but I'm also not understanding the context with which they're saying. I mean, is this like a project manager, or is this like a foreman? Because that pay seems more like a foreman rather than like a PM or someone more in the executive position for projects in construction management. But they're looking at 73.5 on average for the next 10 years with an 11.5% growth rate, which that means that they are projecting a lot of construction. And you can kind of see through the list, where the highest increases are, or where their highest projected increase in labor growth is, and kind of get an idea of where they're projecting things to go. Oh, I got a hiccup, sorry. So like aircraft technician. Well, with all the aircraft travel that we have anymore, what we look at in this is that they're projecting an 11.8% growth for an aircraft tech. Okay, well, that's a guy who works on airplanes. For $68,500 a year, seems low, but I've also met a lot of guys in the private sector in aircraft mechanics that, yeah, that actually seems right. But they are projecting a growth in the aeronautics field, it looks like. We're going to pass by radiation therapists because I don't know shit about them. Millwrights. If that's what I'm thinking, then that's like a mill operator, a wood mill or a steel mill. And they're, 65.5 a year. It's not the worst. Seems a little low. And as you notice, we're going lower on the list. And there's some trades in here that I don't really agree with how they spotted them in their annual salary projection as well as their growth projection. I mean, their growth projections seem all right, actually, but their salaries don't seem as on point as they should be. But they're expecting steel mills and windmills and such to increase 10.3% over the next decade, which that's going to tell me a lot of construction going on. I really don't know much about milling or that space, and I don't really know. I mean, I can only imagine that it's a pretty tough gig to be in. But, hey, if you're already in or you got family that's done it, or maybe you're a second generation, that might be a good spot for you. Ultrasound, that's medical. Let's look at Boilermaker. Now, that's an interesting one that they put in. So, Boilermakers, we don't really have them much on the West Coast. I mean, we have some, but it's just not common out here. Because we use a lot of gas heat and electric heat. We don't really use a lot of boilers. It just depends on your region. A lot of the really kind of cold territories out here, they have boilers or in the wealthy neighborhoods, they have boilers. Primarily just so then, they can do radiant floor heating, things like that, and it heats the home a lot more efficiently. So, I get it. But that's more of an East Coast trade and probably even, more in Europe than here. But they're expecting $61,000 as an annual salary. Seems low, but if you're a technician, makes sense. They're expecting a 1% loss of growth, which is telling me that, it's more of an antiquated trade. It's not one that's being practiced as much anymore. And, it's just, it's old. It's obsolete. It's a trade that really, I think, is going to lose more popularity and more prominence as we go. I would think by 2030, Boilermakers are few and far between. Fitters, pipe fitters. All right, now that's kind of my territory. Between that and the HVAC technician on the list, fitters make okay. Let me preface this. For pipe fitters, this is what I know. It is highly dependent on the region you're in. If you are East Coast working in the big cities, you're probably making more than $60K a year. If you're working Silicon Valley, LA, Reno, Vegas, you're going to be a lot higher than $60K. If you're working Midwest, Texas, yeah, $60K for the average fitter. Journeyman sounds about right. Now, what's cool is that they project a 5% growth rate over the next decade, which is telling me that they're expecting a lot more to go into construction. And with that, it means that they're building more. Pipe fitters are usually relegated to more commercial spaces rather than residential. So when you see pipe fitter, I see pipe 5% growth. That's telling me that they're still expecting the commercial market in construction to continue to improve. So now down to construction inspector. This is a guy no one likes. No one. I don't care who you are. I don't care how much you tweet your shit on YouTube, Facebook, whatever. If you are a trades guy, you do not like the inspector. And it's not because we don't like rule and for things to be done thoroughly and properly. It's that, there are a lot of cases where inspectors, they they make everything really about themselves. You know, goddamn. I mean, how many times have I had an inspector on a job where he had a fucking bad morning? His wife kicked him in the nuts before he got here. Someone fucking shit in his Cheerios, and now he's failing me on everything under the book, in the book, when everything's fine and it's to code and it's good to go. So, yeah, I mean, I can see why they're going to be going down in growth. They're looking at 2.9% loss of inspectors as far as a growth pattern. So that industry is going to contract a bit, which is good. 57.5, that seems average. I would probably say that could be a little higher than the average take home, but really don't know. All I know is that they're assholes. So, electronics technician. Now, this I kind of think is like circuit boards, phones, gadgets, things like that. Things that you are not running electrical like an electrician, but you are working on smaller things like TVs, gadgets. Maybe you're working on circuit boards or control systems in commercial buildings or residential. They're expecting 57,000 for the average, decade-long salary here, which that doesn't seem bad. I mean, for working on small stuff, they're expecting a 2% growth on that. So obviously, electronics and that whole paradigm is starting to grow. Moving down here, we have electrician. Electricians are doing about 56,000 a year for the decade, and that seems low. I mean, I guess if you're just a general electrician, you're working for a contractor, maybe you're an apprentice, maybe you're a journeyman. I would say that also highly depends on the region you are in, because if that's an average, then you have averages of in the hundreds of thousands a year. And so I would say that that's really regional specific. But what's cool is that they're expecting a 9.1% growth increase for the decade. So they're expecting the amount of electricians needed is going to grow by 9.1%. Once again, all I'm seeing is that a lot of the trades are growing. They're going to grow. And this is the right time to get in, I think, because I think the money is going to explode here in the near future, probably in the next 5 years. And that's just primarily because a lot of the older guys are retiring. You have a lot of guys that have transitioned out, and now we have kind of this vacuum. I mean, yes, don't get me wrong. In some areas, you can't sling a dead cat without hitting one of these guys. I get it. But you have also in other parts of the country where you just don't have these infrastructure services. Here's something that's really funny. Just a little side note is like heating and air companies and technicians. One of the biggest issues that we face in this industry is the ability to find hireable employees. And when I say that, I mean you can find a company in 2 seconds on Google, whatever, recommendations, doesn't matter. But the problem is that now you have all these companies, and we're having a hard time with retention on employees. And we're having a hard time finding new employees to fill the olds. And so now what happens is that, even these bigger box companies, they're struggling to meet demand because they just don't have the guys. And they have all these salesmen who are selling all this shit, and they don't have anyone to actually go put it in. And that is going to create a major log jam for the trades. And I know that when it comes to the trades, heating and air, HVAC specifically, is not the only one affected. Electricians, elevator guys, all of them. they are all kind of lumped into that because no one wants to get dirty. Everyone thinks a trade's job is dirty, just like it's not good work and it's not wholesome work. I just don't get it, but whatever. So moving down, we have landscape designer. Now, landscape designer is not the same as a landscaper or the guy who mows your fucking grass. Landscape designers work a lot with the wealthy and they work a lot with commercial orientation, commercial project orientation. So when you see this, like you see a nice commercial building just got put up, it's got nice trees in the front, bark, medians, and all this shit, where basically the property just looks nice. That's key to the landscape designer. Now, those guys are only making 50 and a half a year. And they are not looking at growth over the next 10 years. They're actually looking at a decline. And I can see that just by how the globe is structuring for construction right now. They are not oriented in the sense that they're oriented in the sense that they're going to go more high density housing. So when we look at these things, we just want to kind of keep in mind where we see the future going. Where do we see the value in the trades, and clearly what does the market value for trades? Going down, we have HVAC technician. Now this, I disagree with the number that they're putting on. However, I agree that is probably the average in most of the country that isn't a metro. Okay. So 45K a year, yeah, that sounds about average. I mean, that's what, 25, 30 bucks an hour. That's not bad, but that's also more like mid-level wages, you'd want to pay your journeyman about $30 to $40 an hour, and right there we're sitting at right about 25 to 35. So but they're expecting a 5% growth, which I would expect that number to actually be a lot higher, just because I would think that with the growth of construction and with how much they're doing now, this is also accounting for resident. I think this is more residential, as I was kind of looking through their list as to what their descriptions were for each trade line that they listed. And even though they show a guy in what looks like either a pretty wealthy house or commercial building, realistically, I think that this is more applicable to the residential guys. I think in commercial, those guys are stacking dimes higher than the residential guys, that's for sure. I think commercial guys are probably anywhere from the $65,000 to $100,000 a year range, just because of how much they sell, how much commission they can get, and just the sheer volume of money and projects in the commercial space. So when we look at these things, you have to kind of think, okay, like when we see cable technician on the list, which is just 2 down, okay, the cable technician is only making $5,500 less than the HVAC guy, and all he does is just run fucking wire to get you cable. So, even though, yeah, they're expecting a 0.7 growth, or a 0.7 decline in growth, I still see this as it's like, they do not bring these lists together to make them look attractive. Like, look at solar energy system installer. That's great to me, and it's funny to me because I'm looking at this and it's the highest growth that they're projecting, okay, out of all of them, okay. The next highest one was 11.8 for aircraft technician, okay, or no, excuse me, ultrasound technology. But that's not really a trade in the sense that we're talking here, like, infrastructure construction. This is more medical. But now, if we look at all the actual infrastructure trades, the 52.1% smashes all of them next to construction management and aircraft technician. I mean, even beat the elevator guys out. But what they're doing is that's telling us, okay, they are expecting an enormous amount of growth out of the solar industry. And that's primarily because of the Green New Deal, the Great Reset, all these things that they're pushing for a green culture, green power, alternative energy kind of thing. And so I would think that the average annual salary for a solar guy would be a little higher than that. I would think he would match HVAC, because you see a lot of HVAC companies and solar companies kind of one and one anymore, just like you would see plumbing and heating. They're kind of combining. And so what I think we should actually do is watch this sector highly. I think it's going to be very relevant in the next 10 years, and I think that annual salary is going to grow. So let's kind of look at some of the breakdowns here. So as part of a growing field, power plant operators are responsible for blah, blah, blah. So they're saying that the average salary is $103,000 and that you only need a high school diploma. College or vocational is recommended. Extensive on-the-job training, which usually means that you have to be in when you're young and have a lot of years behind it to get anything in there to be able to grow. And then you also need to have a Nuclear Regulatory Commission license, which I've never heard of that, but I can only imagine that is something that takes a lot of work to get. Okay, we have elevator mechanic. All right, they're at 99.5. And you need your 4-year apprenticeship program. State license, I'm not so sure. If that's a contractor, maybe. If you are just an employee, then you're looking at your high school for sure. 4-year apprenticeship program, yeah, you're probably going to be expected to get in it before you turn out and you're making this kind of money. State license, that I'm not sure on. I'd have to dig in deeper and really kind of take a look, but that seems to entail to me more on the contractor licensing side, maybe not the technician licensing side, but we'll see. Because usually if it's employee licensing or employee certs, it'll be kind of like how it is for the linemen, where they're more based on certificates, kind of like in HVAC, things like that, versus a state license. But who knows? It might just be their work that requires that, just due to liability and things. Lineman. Okay, yeah. If you don't mind working at heights for most of the day, you might consider becoming a lineman. Also known as power line technicians, they maintain, repair, install electric power lines and electrical distribution equipment. This job is also considered dangerous due to the height and high voltage equipment, and you're working out in the elements constantly. They're looking at $85,000 a year, high school diploma, 3-year apprenticeship. Wow, only 3? I thought those were 4. On-the-job training, which would fall back into apprenticeship, because the way apprenticeships are structured is that you work and you get paid while you work, and you're also learning. So, like your first day as an apprentice, you're not doing much. You're the gopher. You're the guy lifting all the heavy stuff. Maybe you're the extra hand on holding something while your journeyman puts something together. Whatever it is. Basically, you're a gopher. You get paid to just be there and learn. So, yeah. We'll do a whole episode on apprenticeships and looking at what the benefits are, what they really entail, and what they mean for the overall. So, now, going down to construction manager. So, here, see, they list state license again, and I'm not really exactly sure what they're expecting out of that, because that seems more like a firm than it is an individual. Because I had plenty of buddies who are project managers, and they didn't need state licensing. just to be able to do the job. So, construction management, which is supervising construction projects. Construction managers oversee projects from start to finish by scheduling contractors, addressing problems, and preparing budgets. It's a fuck ton more than that, buddy. Uh, I mean, you're dealing with everything. So if your concrete guy shows up late, you're ready to set forms. That's shit you got to deal with. They don't list things like that, but hey, whatever. 73.5 a year. I think that's a little low, but I also think that that's probably pertinent to the firm you're in. Okay, aircraft technician. Okay, planes. Da 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 da. Aircraft technician. Your job is to perform maintenance or repairs on aircraft with the help of diagnostic equipment. Blah blah blah. Basically, you're just an auto mechanic, but for airplanes. They're looking at 68.5 a year. Yeah, so this is some more serious, and this is where I think the certification levels and the education level that you have to have versus what you're doing, I don't think it lines up in money. But that's why I kind of stayed away from this field personally, because look at the requirements that you need. You need a Part 147 FAA approved aviation maintenance technician school. So that means you got to go to that school and you got to get certified. Then they're recommending an associate's degree. Okay, so now that's 2 years of schooling, general schooling like math, English, things like that. And then airframe mechanics and or power plant mechanics certification, which usually, from what I understand with aircraft technicians, is that they kind of break them down into two segments. You have the airframe and the chassis, and then you have the motors and the engines. And you have a mechanic for either. But I could be wrong on that. I could be. But that's just how it seems like it's always been kind of parsed out. Millwrights, also known as industrial mechanic, responsible for repairing, maintaining, assembling, and moving machinery in construction sites, factories, and power plants. I was completely wrong about millwrights. So it's not wood or steel. It's not milling anything like it used to be. It's just kind of a misleading name. Basically, you're just on-site mechanic or, gopher. You replace parts, disassemble machine, clean and lubricate equipment. We usually call those facility guys, but here they're calling them millwrights. Average is 65.5. That sounds right. And this is what's great. Look how basic this is. High school diploma, 4-year apprenticeship program, on-the-job training, which that ties back into your 4-year apprenticeship program, because you're going to get paid on the job to learn. And if you're at one place for your whole apprenticeship, that's great. And then you can, depending, it's good to kind of get around for your apprenticeship, because then you can get exposure to different equipment, different environments, different things like that. But you're still going through your apprenticeship and you're still getting on the job training. And for $65,000 a year, I wouldn't be that upset. Boilermakers. Maintain, repair, and assemble boilers and large containers for buildings, factories, and ships. This labor-intensive job requires physical stamina and attention to safety precautions. Yes, and they're also technicians in the sense where they make repairs and construct buildings with them, and they, install them. I don't think you need a state license unless you're a contractor. Boilermakers have some of the most dangerous jobs I've seen in a while. Well, ever seen, really. I haven't seen personally. I have seen photos and I have seen videos and I have heard secondhand accounts and firsthand accounts from those involved in some pretty bad boiler accidents. Like, one of the things you see, and usually it's from a guy who's been there for 20 fucking years and he just doesn't care, or you get it from a newbie who may not have the exposure or the experience to work on it. But usually what ends up happening is a safety fails, something fails, or it gets bypassed because someone was under the gun, someone was under pressure, or they were just lazy. And what'll happen is that the steam barrels get so hot, they develop so much steam they legitimately explode. Or no one checked the flame, no one checked the safeties on the actual burner compartments, and what happens is that the boilers, like commercial boilers, they'll be as big as my desk, if not way bigger. And so you got to imagine like a burner rack as big as my desk here. And if a safety is bypassed, then what can happen is that that burner chamber, where normally you would just kind of have flame up and then it hits the bottom of the barrel for the steam, for the water barrel, and then it starts generating steam, things like that. I've seen it to where, or I've seen stories, I've seen accounts, and I've heard where what happens is someone didn't check shit. Someone wasn't safe. Someone did not do their job thoroughly. And so what happens is that that whole cavity where it'd be your burners and you proper light off, everything's fine. Well, now that space fills with gas and it never lit. So then what happens is that it's creating a bomb. And what happens is that it gets such high concentration. Sometimes it leaks out and another piece of equipment lights it. Or it finally decides that it can light. It wants to light after trying so many times. And boom, no more building. And you get a lot of people that die from this. And so if you're a guy who can pay attention to detail but also likes getting your hands dirty and feeling the satisfaction of making the repair and getting people going again, this might be good for you. If you're a guy who doesn't give a shit about detail, who just wants to get their money, don't do it. You're risking people's lives. Alright, moving on. Fitters. Fitters are responsible for piping systems and constructions. God, their writing is terrible. Maintain long high pressure piping. They also thread cut and troubleshoot malfunction. Okay, now that's all bullshit. I mean, more or less. Pipe fitters, okay. Let's take the union for instance. Union 393, 447, and then I forget what Reno's is. But that's Bay Area, Sacramento, Reno. Pipe fitters don't just go hang pipe. I mean, that's part of our job. I was in the pipe fitters union, and I probably ran pipe like 2 days of the whole fucking time I was in there. Really what it is that we handle HVAC, we handle boilers, we handle cooling towers, we handle chillers. Fitters on the repair side deal with a lot of stuff. The way that they have this article kind of written, this makes me think more like a plumber, and because you don't get fitters in residential. You could even lump sprinkler guys into fitters because they run pipe all day. But the reality is that being a pipe fitter does not just relegate you to pipes. You deal with machinery that uses pipes to convey product or material. Okay? So like a chiller, for instance, right? A chiller, if you've ever seen one, well, hold on. Let me see here. Let me see if I can pull something up real quick. Okay. Let's take a look at these. So you guys want to know what a pipe fitter does? This is what a pipe fitter does. They install, this is a chiller barrel set with a compressor. You have refrigerant coming in and you have water coming in. And if you notice, they use a ton of piping to be able to convey that material. Like these are water pipes. This is chill water, right? You have chill water and then refrigerant. I mean, look at this. Pumps, everything. Now this is probably for some boilers. But it also looks, see, we got banks of boilers and heat exchangers in here. So, like this is a water pump, and this could be very well for a very large chiller. And if you know, so it's a supply pump. So if this is water, so like this is water return. water supply, water return. So, like, we would supply water to the chiller, and then we will return water back to the tower. Okay? So, when you look at pipe fitters, okay, you guys gotta understand that it's not just about like this where you're just hanging pipe. You know, this is all welded pipe, but that's a cooling towers right here. These are for chillers. So, you know, the water return comes back up, comes up here into the grid. It flows over the grid. You have fans over the top, and it uses evaporative cooling to be able to cool that refrigerant or cool the water down to a point where it can go down and run through the chiller tube, the chiller barrel, and remove its heat. And you have different types. You know, you have air to air, you have air to water, all these different types. But this is all primarily like what fitters do. This is electrical right here. So y'all want to be a commercial electrician? Look at that shit. You know, that's not small time. Like, look at this. That's a pretty intense setup for an air to air chiller. You know, so when you're looking at pipe fitting, you gotta kind of have a broad mind because you're not dealing with like, hey, I'm gonna run some water pipe in this house, or hey, I'm gonna run some natural gas pipe for this house. When you're a fitter, this is typically what you're doing, which is you are just running miles and miles of heavy, heavy gauge steel pipe, and it all gets welded together, and you know, it's some big time stuff. And I wish I could see a lot more guys into it, but unfortunately, we just don't see it too often. You know, chiller, you know, chiller plant here. There's a train. Oh, I can't make that bigger. Okay. Oh, I fucking did that bullshit. Okay. So, you know, when you're looking at pipe fitters, I would really take a look at this and say, because there's a lot more money in this industry than I think they're saying. You know, to make, what were they saying? They're saying $60,000 a year. Nah, I would actually estimate that if you're in the right part of the country, you're probably looking at 100 G's, no problem. Okay, construction inspection. Yeah, fuck them. You know, I'm gonna move past them because no one gives a shit. See, now this is an electrician, commercial electrician environment. They're saying that they only make 56,000 a year. I find that horse shit. And they say right there again, you stay licensed. I tend to wonder about that. Alright, so landscaping design. So, landscape designer develop landscaping plans for parks, outdoor spaces, things like that. They deal with various things. State license, I'm not so sure, but they're only making 50 and a half with a bachelor's. Yeah, something's wrong there. Alright, down to HVAC. Now, what's funny is that they cover so much of the industry, but they say that you're only making 45 G's a year. Get the fuck out of here. You know, maybe as just a resi guy and you're not very good, yeah, makes sense. But, you know, if you're commercial refrigeration, commercial HVAC, you're making a lot more than 45K a year. Tech school, yes. On the job training, yes. Apprenticeship, yes. And yes, you will need an EPA card, boys. And that's only to be able to handle refrigerant. If you never worked on refrigerant in your life and you say stayed in the heating side, like gas furnaces and boilers, you would never need an EPA card. But good luck structuring your business or your job around that. Cable tech, yeah, telecommunications. I can't believe that they come in at under 40,000 a year. Now solar. All right, install, assemble, setup, maintain solar power systems. Blah 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 blah. 37 grand a year. That still seems fucking way low. So So that goes over that list. I kind of want to just kind of go over some stuff that wasn't just a how-to product or whatever. I wanted to kind of give some insight as to what options there are for young folks to get in, make some money, and hopefully strategize as to where the industry's going, where they can put their efforts in, and you know, how they can make, how you guys can make your future brighter, or at least more substantive than just being a guy who goes to work, maybe works on some shit, and you don't get paid very much. I really do want you guys to make the most money you can doing what you want. It's just hard to do. And you gotta be patient, you gotta be diligent, you gotta be willing to work hard, and you gotta have that drive, baby. So, alright. Well, I think that'll end it for this one today. Thanks for joining us, and I'm hoping that maybe that helped you out. Maybe that covered some info for you guys. And maybe you guys will end up doing some of your own research and seeing how horseshit some of these list stats are. And unfortunately, these are so generic that, I think that you're going to have a hard time finding actual studies that show where the growth is going to be and where the industry is going. But I'd say just watch the news. Look at what they're saying. They want to bring green technology. Well, Boilermakers are going to go out. Elevators will stay because, people are fucking lazy. So you have some direction here. So would love some recommendations. Leave a comment, subscribe, set the alerts. I don't know, all that bullshit. And let's make some money together, man. All right, catch you on the next one. Peace.